Well, everyone, happy Nowruz. I wish you all a joyous, healthy, and inspiring Nowruz, which started yesterday and will continue for 13 days. So you have plenty of time to celebrate. As the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto, I welcome you all to our Nowruz session of the Zoroastrian Studies seminar series, which features Dr. Kerman Daruwalla of Parzor Foundation. Dr. Daruwalla is joining us from Bombay and will be speaking on the Multimedia Yasna and the training of Zoroastrian priests in India. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Daruwalla for accepting our invitation to speak on such an auspicious occasion. I'm also grateful to my colleagues, Professor Enrico Raffaelli and Professor Miguel Angel Toledo, for co-convening the series. I also want to express my gratitude to our collaborators, the Federation of Zoroastrian Associations of North America, Zoroastrian Society of Ontario, Encyclopaedia Iranica Foundation, and the Roshan Cultural Heritage Institute, and Dr. Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali for helping to establish the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto. Dr. Mir-Djalali is here with us today, and I would like to also especially thank her and wish her a happy Nowruz. At the outset, I would like to express our collective gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people and acknowledge this land on which the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies operates. For thousands of years, this land has been the homeland of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and more recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, learn, and teach in their ancestral homeland. My colleague, Professor Enrico Raffaelli, will be introducing Dr. Kerman Daruwalla and will moderate today's session.
So, just a few words to thanks to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Kerman Daruwalla. Dr. Daruwalla is the project coordinator for the Tata Institute of Social Sciences Parzor Academic Programme. He completed his PhD at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London in 2021 with a thesis whose title is Becoming an Athravan, a study of the training of Zoroastrian priests in India. He holds an MA in Avestan-Pahlavi from the University of Mumbai and an MA in Iranian Studies from SOAS, London, where he got his PhD too. Importantly for today's presentation, he works as a consultant for the Multimedia Yasna project at SOAS, where he has advised the project team on the interactive Yasna film and supported the Multimedia Yasna team on the Gujarati ritual direction. So I recommend everyone to check out the website of the Multimedia Yasna. So his areas of interest include Zoroastrian ritual text and Parsi Zoroastrian priestly history and contemporary practice. In 2021, I want to mention his book that he co-authored with Dr. Redar, whom we have the honor and pleasure to host in a couple of months. The book is titled The Gujarati Ritual Directions of the Paragna Yasna Visparad Ceremonies. Dr. Daruwalla.
Thank you very much, Professor Raffaelli, for this kind introduction. And Professor Tawakkoli, thank you very much again for introducing and allowing me to speak on this auspicious occasion of Nowruz. Very happy Nowruz to everyone on this call. Thank you very much for making time on this auspicious day to come and listen to me. Warm good afternoon to everyone in Canada, and good evening to all my colleagues here in India and around. So as mentioned, my topic for today is going to be on the Multimedia Yasna, and in particular about the training of Zoroastrian priests in India. So let me start by sharing my screen. And yes, and thank you very much to the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute for having me for this session today. So what I'm going to talk about today is just introduce you to the Multimedia Yasna project, and then spend the bulk of time talking about the training of Zoroastrian priests in India, which was the topic of my PhD dissertation. And then spend some time at the end to talk about the recent projects and initiatives that I've been involved with. So having said that, the Multimedia Yasna project was started back in 2016 and was initially for a period of 5 years, which was extended by 1 year and finished in 2022. And it was with the funding of the European Research Council, whose principal investigator of the project was Professor Almut Hinze at SOAS. And the entire project involved 8 PhD and postdoc collaborators who came up who worked on individual portions of the Yasna ritual. The Yasna is the high liturgy and one of the most important rituals of the Zoroastrian priestly tradition. And the aim of this particular project, the Multimedia Yasna project, was to come up with a new edition of the Yasna text, not just from the written manuscript tradition, but also to look at it from the living, oral, and performative aspect as it's still being performed in India. And the key part of this particular project was the filming or the entire recording of the Yasna ritual as it's performed, along with the paragna, the preparatory paragna process. And this was done in 2 different sort of filming techniques. One was the regular filming of the Yasna, including the sort of close-in views of the ritual process. And the second was, which I'm going to show on the next slide here, was a complete sort of 360 degree interactive recording in which a camera is put in the center of the ritual precinct, and the entire ritual is recorded as if the person is sitting at the center of the ritual itself and can view all the sides in a completely immersive experience. So this recording of the film was the first, the main output of the Yasna project, of the Multimedia Yasna project. The second part of which, for which I was responsible, was for documenting the entire priestly training. So how do the priests learn and perform this entire ritual, which spans about 2.5 to 3 hours? And what is the sort of training that they undergo in order to be ready to be able to perform this proficiently? So, and that I'm going to discuss as part of my talk today. The third output of the Yasna, the Muya project, was the editorial tools, which were to do with the transcription of the Yasna text as it appears in the manuscripts, and also the collation tool, which was used to collate the different sort of witnesses of this particular text. And the last output is the individual text editions of the Yasna. So different collaborators have worked on different parts, different chapters of the Yasna text. And what I'm going to show here is the output. So there have already been 3 publications on this. My colleague Celine, who is present here today, has worked on the chapters 3 to 8, which is the important Sarosh drone, and has already come out with a publication on it, which is on the right-hand side. Shown on the left is my other colleague, Benedict Peschel, who worked on the first 3 chapters of the first Gatha, the Aunavati Gatha, and his edition is covers these chapters to 28 to 30 of the Yasna. Shown in the center is the book which was spoken up in the introduction, the Gujarati Ritual Directions, which I have published with my colleague Celine Redard. And this is essentially the translation of the Gujarati Ritual Directions as it appears in the most commonly used handbook of the Yasna, which is the one by T.D. Anklesaria. And this is the same book that is used to train the students at the training institutes, which I'm going to show you in this upcoming slides. And besides these three publications which are already out, there are 5 more which are in the works and will probably be upcoming in the next year or so. There is one by my colleague Martina Palladino on the Sanskrit version of the first 8 chapters of the Yasna. There's also the one by Mirbot Khanizadeh on the Home Yash, the chapters 9 and 10. Kiara is working on the Sarosh Yashpat, the hymn to Sarosha, which is chapters 56 and 57. Stefano on the last part of the Yasna, the last 10 chapters, which contains the Abzor and the concluding part of the Yasna. And finally, my book will also be published based on my thesis, which covers the training of the priest in India. So I just like to quickly show you what the interactive film of the Yasna looks like, and I think everyone who's interested can go to the website. So I've listed the web page for the interactive film at the bottom here, and I'll put it in the chat also. And this takes you to the page which shows you the film of the Yasna along with the main important parts, the outputs of the project, which are one at the bottom. We show you the Avestan text that is being recited, and simultaneously the translation of the Avestan text appears for the reader. And then on the right hand side, for all the implements or all the parts, each important aspect of the ritual area is shown and is described in detail on the right hand side. So if I just play, so the user needs to go and select a chapter of the Yasna. The initial part is the Paragna, the preparatory chapters of the Yasna ritual, and then the main Yasna, the 72 chapters of the Yasna appear. And then within that, they need to select whichever stanza they want to view. So here I'm playing one of the parts from the Paragna ritual, which the priest prepares before the actual starting of the ritual. And here he's counting and tying the barsam, the libation wire, which is an integral part of the ritual. So I'll just so as you can see, I'm just going to pause here. So as the priest recites, the part at the bottom keeps on changing and gets updated with the present recitation, and then the translation to that can be viewed right below that. And at each point, when you pause the film, it gives you this option to view each of these elements in detail. So here we have the libation wire, which is being described here. There's a picture of that in detail shown on the right hand side, and also a detailed description of the function and where it appears in the ritual and what is its importance. Similarly, if I were to click on the Homa twig, which is in the other hand, similarly it shows all the details of each of these implements of the ritual. And if we go ahead to any other part, for example, we see much more details in terms of where. So, for example, this is the entire ritual precinct. Here is at the center is the fire vase. And if I were to click on that, it will show me the details of the fire plate, what the term in Gujarati is called, what is it in Persian, and the various functions of that particular part. So this is a novel, an innovative first time where the user, whoever is interested, can not only look at the ritual recitation and its translation, but also look at the actual actions that are being performed, along with the significance of each of the different parts or elements of the ritual process. So, having said that, I will go back to my presentation. And yeah. So this is a brief introduction to the Muya project itself. I'd like to spend the next about 30 minutes talking about the training of the priest. and how it happens in India contemporarily. So just to give a brief historical background, we have the text of the Dadestani Denik, which is a Middle Persian text composed in the early Islamic period, which roughly around the 9th, 10th century of the Common Era. And it gives us a view of the state of the Zoroastrian priesthood at that point of time. And from that, we are given to know that there were two types of priestly training that the priest underwent at that time. The first level was the one where the liturgical texts were learned by the priest, and the term used for such priest was a havisht, meaning a disciple or a trainee priest. And the main function of the havisht was to be able to perform the ritual which was commissioned by the community at large. And then the second level was when some of these trained priests would go to what was called the Herbedistan to further learn and pursue scholarly studies. And such a priest who was then sort of familiar with the Zand of the Avestan text and other texts like the Videbdat and the Sayasht le Sayasht, such a priest would then be termed a Herbed. And he would not necessarily be just for the performance of ritual, but to sort of guide the community on different religious matters. So that was a case about 1,000 years back. How that has translated, how these terms have translated to the present day is that, and I talk about the Indian priestly tradition in particular over here, that at the first level, similarly the priestly initiates, they first undergo the priestly initiation of Navar, and they are after undergoing the initiation, they are called Erwad, which is a term which is a derivative of the term Herbed. But an Erwad is not the same connotation as the word Herbed meant what it meant earlier. In the sense, the Erwad is just a priest who's just undergone the initial initiation and is just qualified to perform the rituals and not necessarily a learned priest in that sense. And the second term used is a Mobed, which in the Parsi priestly parlance is reserved for the priests who are actually actively performing the rituals. And the term, the havisht, the term is come down to the present day in the term Osta, which is a term reserved for any male member of the priestly family, but one who has not undergone the priestly initiation yet. So we see that the terms havisht and herbed have evolved to the term Osta and Erwad, but don't necessarily have the same meaning. A person who would further undergo a scholarly study and train to become a religious scholar and then on to become a head priest, who's called the Dastur, is the second level. But there are very few who would really undergo that kind of scholarly study as of now. So the focus of my talk today will be the top part, which I have shown in the box part, the training which the priest undergo to learn the rituals, to learn the text of the ritual and be able to perform the ritual in a ceremonial setting. So in terms of the present day, there are what we call two types of priestly initiates. So the majority is what we call, and these are Gujarati terms, called either aduro, which means incomplete, or the other term used is a kacho. Kacho means raw or not ripe. And Navar is the first stage of priestly initiation. So an aduro Navar or a kacho Navar refers to a priest who has undergone the priestly initiation without having completed the entire sort of training, but just done the basic sort of requirement to be able to undergo it. And the other term which is used is for the other set of the completely fully trained priest is what is called Sampurna. Sampurna meaning complete or comprehensive. Or the other term is Pakko. Pakko meaning right in Gujarati. So that is where the priestly candidate has completed the entire curriculum wherein most of the texts are memorized. And I'll cover that in the forthcoming slides. And then only undergone the initiation ceremony. So if you look at the differences between the two types, the second big difference is the training duration itself. So we see that in the first case where the where it is the Adhuro Navar or the incomplete Navar, the training is just for maybe as less as a few days, or maybe just the period before which the student is undergoing the initiation, or the first 9 days where he's taking the Barashnum or the ablution. The 9-day long ablution is when he's being trained. Or in some cases, it goes up to a year or maybe even a couple of years. But the main difference is that the candidate only familiarizes himself with the text and doesn't necessarily undergo the memorization process that is required. Whereas in the case of the comprehensive Sampurna Navar, we see that at least up to 3 to going up to maybe 7 or even 8 years of training is the requirement to be able to memorize all the texts which are required to be able to undergo the Navar initiation. As of today, a majority of the priests in India belong to the first category. So it roughly well, it's not, we don't have a exact count, but the number of priests in India would roughly be, say, around close to, say, 400 to 500 priests as of now, who practice maybe on a frequent or ad hoc basis. And out of these, there will be roughly less than 50 who belong to the second category, who have undergone the Sampurna Navar and are able to perform these longer rituals. So most of the majority of priests, their capability is to perform most of these smaller outer ceremonies, which are more commonly performed. But only the more comprehensively trained priests are able to perform the more longer and sort of more solemn, longer liturgies like the Yasna, the Vispera, the Videvdat, and the other things. So this brings me to the places where the priests are trained for undergoing the comprehensive training. So most of these 50 priests that I speak about who have undergone the complete training have passed out from one of these two schools of priestly training. These two are the resident schools. Both are located in Bombay, in Mumbai, in India. The first one on the left is the Dadar Athravan Institute, which is still functional. It started a little more than 100 years ago in 1919. It was started by the Athravan Mandal, which is the association of priests, a body of priests who works for the welfare and the schemes for the priests. And they had come together and realized the need for having an institution where the training is uniformly imparted to all the priests. Because prior to these institutions, we had these small schools in different parts of Gujarat and of India, where there were different sort of idiosyncrasies depending on the training schools. So we had the different panths, the Bagariyas, the Sanjanas, and we had the different sort of traditions, the Kadmi tradition, Shenshai tradition. So there were differences which crept into the ritual performance also. So there was a need to make the ritual training more uniform, which was why these institutions were planned. And in 2019, the Dadar Athravan Institute was established. And a few years after that, an individual benefactor by the name of Mervanji Mancherji Kama established one more madrasa in memory of his father, Mancherji Framji Kama, in Andheri. And this was sort of funded from his own sort of wealth. So there was more like a private institution compared to the Dadar Athravan, which was a more community-funded institution. So we'll come to the details on the enrollments at these institutions in some time. But what I'd like to talk about is the students. Now, these are resident school for the students who want to undergo the priestly training, priestly initiation. And what I've shown here is the daily routine of the students that are enrolled there. So typically a student enrolls when they are about 6 to 7 years of age and continue their study for about the period of 7-8 years at this institution. So if we see here, I've shown the typical day, which starts at about 6 in the morning. And what I've highlighted here is the parts which are dedicated to the training of the religious texts. So they have about half an hour of prayer recitations in the morning, followed by what we call the Bantar study. Bantar refers to the actual text of the prayer. And it means basically the recitation training. So the student here is essentially memorizing all these texts which are part of the curriculum and which need to be memorized for performing the entire yasna ceremony. So basically, if you see, there are two slots, one in the morning from 7 to 8, and then one more just before lunch, which is where this study is carried out. And this is for the junior students up to the 7th grade. And then after that, the senior students, because they are coming to the close of finishing their entire curriculum, they have only one time slot of about 1.5 hours, and they spend more time with their other secular subjects. So that is a 2 hours for the Bantar study, and then there is half an hour again in the evening for the recitation of the prayers. So on a daily basis, the students are engaged with 2 hours of actually memorizing the prayers and 1 hour of reciting them as part of their devotional recitation. So why this is important? Because this 2 hours of daily training, if you accumulate that over a long period of time, so at the Athravan institutes, in a full year, there are about 250 days which are dedicated to the study the study of these texts. The rest of the days are part of their vacations or when the students are visiting their families or maybe not well, things like that. So these 250 days and 2 hours every day translate to about 500 hours of study per year. And on average, each of these students spend about 7 to 8 years at these institutions at these Athravan institutions. So overall, over this entire duration, they end up spending something like 3,000 to 4,000 hours of these memorization studies. This sort of sheer volume of time that they spend is simply not possible to be replicated anywhere outside of these institutions, which is why we find that the only comprehensive trained priests are almost always from one of these two institutions. Out of the 50 priests that I mentioned earlier, barely 1 or 2 are those who have not spent any time at these institutions, have completely trained outside. So, my focus of today's talk will basically throw light on how the training happens at these two institutions. So, what are the main features of this training, of this Bantar training that happens at these institutions? So I'm going to show you a small clip on how the training, on what the typical day is like at this institute. But what I'd like you to focus on is these sort of points which are mentioned here. So one is that on a daily basis, these long texts, the Yasna text which we are talking about is 72 chapters, which consists, so each chapter is roughly anywhere between, say, 3-4 stanzas going up to about 30-34 stanzas. So not all chapters are similar. And each is broken down into these individual stanzas. And the overall yasna of 72 chapters is more or less about 1,000 stanzas long. So the goal of this memorization is to complete these entire 1,000 stanzas, commit them to memory. And how does this happen? That each stanza, 1 or 2 stanzas are done per day, and the students are in a common class, but each student is learning his or her own portion basically. So in a class of say 20 students, each of the 20 students will be learning a different stanza. And how does he do that? He recites that loudly, continuously, again and again, till he gets hold of that in his memory. And then he needs to go and recite that in front of the teacher. And only once the teacher is satisfied that he's marked that this portion is completed, and he's allowed to go to the next stanza for recitation. And in between these sort of recitation sessions, after every few sessions, there's a revision cycle. So he needs to go back and revise each of the earlier learned stanzas. And there is a very strong sort of daily and monthly tracking of progress of these students. And if the students are lagging, then they're made to spend more time on the Bantar studies as compared to their other activities. And if not, then they are sort of put on a different sort of slow tracked mode where they'll be made to not memorize as many things and maybe learn to sort of fluently read them instead. Then there are also the prayer examinations and competitions which the students are frequently undergoing, which helps in this entire sort of learning process. And finally, they are made to perform the actual ritual in which they put into use what they have memorized. So what I like to show you is a typical day of the students at the Dadar Athravan Institute. So I'm just going to play this clip here and then we can discuss about that. So what I'd like you to see here is that what I was talking about, each of these students sitting in class is learning his or her, his own part, no, not her still. And they are all sort of making this big cacophony in the same class. So the idea is that you recite it loudly and you're able to hear your own recitation and thereby continuously sort of go on reciting until it is committed to memory. And then the student would need to go and stand in front of the teacher here and then recite the part which is assigned. So I'll just continue that. So this DPY is the school where they go for the regular schooling. The DPY is the Dadar Parsi Youth Assembly, which is a school for regular students, and they go to learn their secular subjects. And there they would go from standards 1 to 10th and complete their sort of 10th, which is their matriculation in the Indian system. So all these clips were from the recordings, filming, which was done by Anna and Remy Sowa of Shuet Films. And they've made a sort of full-length documentary film called The Mobed, the Parsi Priest, on the life and the days spent at this Dada Rathonan Institute by the students as they are training to become full-fledged priests. And this should be should be released, I think, for viewing in this year, sometime this year. So back to my presentation. Yes. So the thing to keep in mind is that from this film is that they have such a chock-a-block schedule that everything is sort of in their own boxes. So the priestly training is in those 2 hours of the day, and then their school time is when they go to school and they come and do their assignments in that particular time of the day. So there's very little flexibility in terms of sort of doing things out of the sessions. So in the coming slides, I'm going to show you some of the important elements of this particular, how the training is effectively imparted. So one important part of this training is their Bhantar lesson book, or where they record each of their daily sort of performance of what they've memorized. So I've shown an example here, which is from, say, the 1st July of 2015, where the student is learning the 10th chapter of the Yasna, which is recorded, and it records which particular stanza he's done for the day. So in this case, he's learned the 17th stanza, which has been memorized and completed on that particular day. And then on the next day, on the 2nd of July, he has been assigned the 18th stanza, and then which he's completed and given back. And the point to note here is that you don't just recite that particular 17th and 18th stanza for that day, but you need to start from the first stanza of that particular chapter and to be able to recite all of them in front of the teacher to be able to get that sort of tick mark for that particular day. So you not only have to learn that new stanza, but you need to revise all the previous stanza of that particular chapter, which is an important part of the memorization process, in the sense that you're repeating over so this particular chapter would have taken, say, 20 days to memorize. For all the 20 days, the initial stanzas are being memorized and new stanzas are being added at the end. And then shown here is that the student has completed the 18th stanza and also finished memorizing the 19th stanza on the same day, which is why he's been given a good comment and an excellent comment for doing a third and a fourth if he manages to do that. And then the last line shows in this parenthesis is a session on the 5th, which is on the 3rd. Basically, the chapter 10th of the Yasna is completed. The entire 21 stanzas are completed. So immediately after that, on the next day, there is a session which is dedicated to revising all the older texts which have been learned. So in this case, the student is revising one of the Srosh Yash Wadi, which also appears as the Yasna Ha 57, but is an individual text which is important for death ceremonies. And this is what he has learned maybe a year or two ago and needs to again revise and be able to recite it in front of the teacher. So this way, all the older portions are similarly carried forward along with the new stanzas which are being learned. And this Bhantar recitation lesson book maintains the complete record starting from the first day the student starts at school until the last day which he drops out of passes out of the institution. And this was a key sort of record based on which I could make a lot of my analysis and findings based on these records, which were so meticulously sort of planned and written down. So what I want to show you is the progression of a student from the time he enrolls in the first year up till the time he completes his entire priestly training. So this is an actual example of a student who was admitted in 2012. Called Shyama, and he enrolled when he came to the 2nd grade of schools and admitted in the 2nd standard at 7 years. So in the first year of enrollment, when he was in the 2nd standard, he was made to learn all the text of the Khorde Avesta which are required to be memorized, which are the 5 Gas, the Nyayashis, the Patet Pashimani prayer, the Stum Karda, which is again a ritual, a death ritual. and other miscellaneous prayers from the Chord Avesta. This is what the entire first year was dedicated to. In the second year, the student learned in the first half most of the important yasht which are required to be memorized. So the Srosh Yasht Hadok, which is basically the yasht 11, which is again used during the third day ceremony after death. Also the Srosh Yash Vadi, which is again Yasna 57, which is an important prayer recited at many occasions. The other important yash, the Hormaz, Adibesht, Vanant Yash, the Sirozag. And then after completing this, which roughly takes another half year, so essentially the first year for the Chord Avesta and half a year for the Yash, he then starts the Yasna chapters. So basically the Yasna with the Dibacho, which is chapter 0. And here the student managed to complete the first 7 chapters of the Yasna by the second year. So basically half a year for the first 7 chapters. And then you see that the entire second year is dedicated to, and he managed to finish up to the 27th chapter. And that is because some of the most important and most sort of difficult texts appear during this section. So chapters 9 and 10, which are the home yasht, are quite difficult. The chapters of the first and second gathas. So in this case, he's not even reached the gathas yet, but which will come in the third year of his Yasna study. So chapters 28 onwards is where the gathas start, and he's managed to finish the first and half of the second gatha in this year, and then the Yasna is actually completed in his 5th year of study, which is the end of the 72nd chapter, and then the Visparad is taken up. Visparad is a comparatively smaller text and easier to memorize, which takes roughly about 6 months to complete the entire 23 chapters. So here the student has completed the Visparad midway through the 6th year. And after he completes the entire Yasna and the Visparad, he becomes eligible to be to undergo the Navar initiation, because the prerequisite of the Navar itself requires the candidate to perform the entire Yasna ritual for the first 3 days. And on the last day, a Visparad ritual is performed by the initiate as the chief priest. So this is the reason why the entire Yasna and the Visparad need to be completely memorized and learned in a ritual performance before the initiate can go through the Navar ceremony. So in this case, in November 2017, which is after about 6.5 years of enrolling, the student completed the Navar. And then after that, he learns the other texts which are important for the outer ceremonies, mainly the Afrinagans and the Afrins. And also the Farokshi, which is basically the Fravadin Yash 13, which are all used for outer ceremonies, mostly commemorative ceremonies, which are performed on a daily basis at most fire temples. And after he completes this, he starts with the Videvdat, which is the longer text, which will be useful for him to undergo the Marathab, which is the second level of initiation. So the Videvdat is a long text, and the ceremony is the one which is performed through the night. And since it is such a long text, it is only fluently learnt to be read. It is not completely memorized. And the fluent reading of the Videvdat roughly takes another 6 months. So by the 7th year or roughly the 8th year, the student completed the entire curriculum of the Navar and the Marathab. And then finally, he was able to undergo the Marathab initiation in May 2019, which is about 8 years after he started his study at the Atonan Institute. So this gives an idea of what the typical progression is. Some students are faster, some would be slightly slower. What I'm showing here is a chart tracking the progress of the students who memorize the Yasna. So on the vertical axis is basically the chapters, the 0 to 72nd chapter. And on the horizontal axis is the progress of each student of when they completed it. So the point to see here is that not all the lines, so at any point of time, the students are at different places. So if I see, for example, in say November 14, there are students who have not yet started, some who are on the say 4th or 5th chapter, one is on the 9th, one is on the 18th, and so on. And so different students are doing different parts of the Yasna at the same time, and the sort of the steepness of the line indicates how fast they've completed it. So some students, like the one in the red and the gray line, took almost 4 years to complete it, whereas the one shown last year on the right-hand side took roughly even less than 2 years to get through the entire memorization. So each student has a different capability and a different time that he'll require to go through this portion, which is why this entire training is more individually focused and can't be done as a sort of group training. One more important point which I had mentioned earlier was this repeated revision cycles. So what I've shown here is this student who started to memorize this Yasna chapters in September 14. This is when he's completing each of these individual chapters. And as soon as he completes and reaches a particular milestone, say 8 chapters, he starts the first revision of these first 8 chapters again. And so this is done simultaneously. He goes on learning the new chapters and goes back to revising the older learned chapters again. And this revision cycle is repeated again and again till the time he completes the entire Yasna. So here we see that by the time he finishes the entire memorization of 3 years, he's already undergone about 7 or 8 cycles of revising these older chapters. And this is the key process by which the text learned is committed to long-term memory and can be recalled easily while performing it in a ritual context. So, and here I just wanted to sort of draw a comparison with the similar sister tradition, the Vedic tradition in India, in which the Vedic students undergo a similar sort of daunting task of learning all the text. And here is a sort of statement by David Knipe, who had recorded the priest of a state of Andhra Pradesh. And here he says that the small boy with impressionable brain cells as a calling and faces a syllabus unbelievably daunting in its totality, which is true of the Yasna and the Visparad also. And true that he's adding only one line or one stanza at a time. Nonetheless, the pressure from the cumulative weight of successive days is enormous. And the task is so formidable that the dropout rate is high. So the point I'm trying to focus here is that while it's easy to learn one new stanza a day, what becomes extremely difficult is to carry that entire sort of load with you over the years, over the 6-7 years, that you are adding new portions, but you're also keeping retaining all the entire learned text in your mind at the same time. So I'd like to briefly come to the conclusion of what I wanted to say. How priestly training has evolved over the past 100 years since these institutions have come about. What has remained constant is that the curriculum has more or less remained the same. The fundamental techniques of memorizing, of breaking them into smaller units, of repetition, revision, all that has remained more or less same. There has been little or no impact of technological advances, like basically only during COVID was some sort of training imparted over video conferencing. But besides that, in terms of the actual learning process, it's exactly almost very similar to what it was, say, 100 years ago. However, things have evolved. The priestly training time has now dropped to about 2 hours. Earlier, in the earlier years of these institutions, there were about close to 5 hours of daily training. And much lesser time was given to secular subjects. Whereas now the students spend much more time on learning the regular studies than on the actual priestly training. And consequently, the actual ritual training part is reduced to barely a few weeks before the initiations, which earlier was done for many years. So as soon as the students started, they would be trained on the ritual process also. So what I want to say here is that the focus, the goal in the earlier years was to sort of train a fully proficient priest who could, when he comes out of the school, was ready to undergo and perform these longer rituals with proficiency. Whereas now the focus is on making sure that the student undergoes the memorization process, and then in future, if he chooses to take up the path of priesthood, can practice with senior priest, and then with practice, recall and rememorize what he's already trained, and then become a priest who can perform these longer rituals. So the focus has sort of become slightly different over the past years. Very quickly, the enrollments have declined over the past decades. And now we have, as of now, roughly 13 students who are presently enrolled at the Dadar Institute. This number used to be well over 60 in the earlier decades, whereas the MF Kama Arthonan Institute, which is in Andheri, which had even more students, or roughly over 100 students at certain points of time, has sadly no students enrolled from the past almost 10 years now. And this is a reflection of the supply of priestly students coming forward to undergo this long and vigorous training. As a result, we have roughly 50 fully trained priests. Here I've quickly shown you where these are the different places, the different agyaris and atash behrams, where there are priests who perform these rituals on a regular basis, the longer rituals like the Yasna Vispara. And there are a total of about 50 priests who can do that. Which brings me to the end of what I want to say is that these sort of inner liturgies have been an integral part of the Zoroastrian tradition, priestly tradition, since at least the Achaemenid times. So that would be about 2,500 years at least. And these rituals need to be entirely memorized before they can be performed, which is only possible at these sort of resident training institutions. And as of the present day, there are barely 1 or 2 students who are dropping out each year and enrolling new students because of various reasons, and which has led to a complete sort of dry up in the pool of students who are able to perform these rituals. So going forward, the sustenance of these longer and more important liturgies like the Yasna and Vispara are severely endangered. And this has happened within a span of 1 generation, and which is why there's a cause of worry among the community over here. So this is on the priestly training. I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the new projects that are, so one is on the Avestan ritual in India, which is a new project by the ERC funded to Professor Almut Hinze, again at SOAS. And the focus of this is going to be the Vispara ritual, which we have already recorded and filmed in December. But also this will have a more larger focus in terms of looking at the Gujarati ritual directions, at the Sanskrit sort of manuscripts, and from other different perspectives. And this has just started this year, which will be going on running for the next 5 years. And another project which I have been closely involved with for the past almost 3 years now is the TISS-Parzor Academic Project, which was introduced at the beginning. And we have introduced an online certificate program, which is the first offering of this TISS-Parzor program. And here, which started in last September, and we have quite a few of my colleagues who are on this call today. And we have been offering courses pertaining to Parsi Zoroastrian culture, history, heritage. As you can see, the courses on different aspects of Zoroastrianism, and which are being offered by world-class faculty and experts in their own domains. I have listed down the link to this particular program where you can get more information, and I'll be happy to provide any more information to people who are interested. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for the time given to me, and I'll be happy to take questions as you know, either from the chat or from as they appear. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Daruwalla, for this very detailed presentation. I learned details about the Muya project that I was not aware of, although I know, of course, the project. And I think what you last said about the declining number of priests, of which, of course, I was aware, makes it, shows even more how important it is, the project of video recording and documenting the rituals that is being done right now. So we have few minutes for questions, and I don't know. I first start with if there's any question from the audience, then I'll select some questions from the chat. I don't see any hands up. Is there anyone who's So yes, Nia, if you want to ask your question, and then
good session, Dr. Daruwalla. Thank you very much for all this information. It was lovely to hear. My one question, sir, is you talked about the training that happens in India. Is there some similar training for priests that happens anywhere else around the world, or is it very unique?
No, so so obviously there is the training in Iran, which I have not documented, but it requires an expert, somebody over there who can do it. Just very briefly to answer, so in Iran, the tradition of these longer liturgies has sort of fallen out since the last many decades. Since about the 1960s or so, these have stopped being performed, and hence the training now is focused on the other sort of aspects which requires the other ceremonies which are required to be performed. And so the students there don't really undergo this kind of memorization of the entire yasna as of the present day in Iran. And in the diaspora, again, Canada is a classic example where the NAMC, the North American Mobet Council, runs and trains priests. Again, the focus is on both aspects. One is sort of memorizing most of maybe the small important prayers, but also on learning about the theology, about the importance of the significance of the rituals, more than sort of this memorizing of the longer yasna ritual. And that is because the yasna by itself is also currently only performed in India and at only a select locations.
Okay,
So,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next is Farzin Yazishni, who's been very active also in the chat. So we'll take his question.
Yeah. Yes, Farzin. Yeah.
Well, at this juncture, since I was a student of madrasa, or the institute, I would really want to appreciate Rustamji Pandaki, who was the person who took so much of an effort. I would say it wasn't just he had put in so much of an effort that when he had to rejuvenate this space at the institute, he had actually by himself gone from door to door asking people to contribute to get this institute back into its original state. But then the question is, since I've become a little more inquisitive, have there been any improvement in techniques, or what are the techniques for them to learn to be able to fasten the process? Is it like the same old technique of just memorizing and reading from the book, or has there been any audio? Because as far as I remember, there were a few techniques that they were going to initiate and put in for the students, for them to hear a few prayers. I don't know what has happened over the years.
Right. So thank you for your question and comment. So the first one pertains to Rustamji Pandaki was the principal of the Dadar Athravan Institute in the years from when. So the institute was almost shut down due to lack of funds in the 1960s, and he was instrumental in reviving it. And that is what Farzin is talking about. And the second question about the actual technological sort of advancement. So this thing about in the early 2000s, the Walkman was introduced and given to students to sort of listen to the recorded prayers, recitation, to be able to learn them faster or something. But as I spoke to the principal, Edward Ramyar Karanjia over there, that this kind of initiatives were not really useful, in the sense the student really needed to sit and listen focusedly and sort of recite it again and again, and only then was he able to really memorize. So while these things were tried out, they were only sort of adjuncts, or sort of, in terms of some sort of associated help, but they couldn't really replace the actual process of going through the entire motion of memorizing, if I were to say that. So they've been only sort of minor additions, if I may call it.
Just a suggestion, since it is a cluster of a lot of noise that takes place into the same place, like in the classroom, can be, I see only 9 students in the whole institute. Maybe if they can assign a few people different corners so that they can hear their own prayers and be able to learn it faster, because it's a little corner for them. Yeah. just a suggestion. Maybe you can forward it to Dr. Ramya.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure.
There's a question from the chat which relates to a very important matter, not only with respect to the observation of the ritual, but with respect to access to the temple. So I don't know if you can. So the question is, can a person who is not a Zoroastrian visit a temple to observe this ritual? The answer is very simple, that is no. But maybe if you can say a few more words about access of people who are, for example, intermarried, who might not be Zoroastrian, but married to a Zoroastrian, can they access? Because there's been a lot of debate and changes over the last years too, right?
Right. So so we know that the as per the prevailing tradition in India, the Parsi Zoroastrians are the one who can enter the temple. So non-Parsis do not enter. In terms of married spouses, there is so if it's a non-Zoroastrian spouse, the spouse technically can't enter because they're not sort of, you don't convert to a Zoroastrian. But there are new initiatives where a couple of new places of worships have started, where they maintain a fire and which is open to other spouses of intermarried Zoroastrians and whoever else professes to be a Zoroastrian. So there are, but in the long-standing sort of tradition of priests in India, at least so far, only Zoroastrians are allowed to access the inner sanctum sanctorum after undergoing the necessary ablutions and the custody ritual which is required to be performed. Yeah.
Very good. I think there's only, unfortunately, time for one extra question by Nazneen Catalin de Souza. I see her; she raised her hand. We're past the time, but I'll allow one question.
Thank you. Just a quick question.
I'm sorry. I'm absolutely very sorry to interrupt. To add into the same answer that Dr. Daruwalla said, if anybody wants to know and see these processes, since they're conducted in the fire temple, but then if the person wants to know and see these things, they can coordinate and get in terms with Dr. Ramya Karanja in the same institute, and then be able to see they have got to get permission from him to be able to see and
Okay, thanks. Okay, so Nazneen,
just a quick question. My question is more about the rhythm, cadence, and the lyricism of the prayers. Some mobeds almost sing their prayers, some chant their prayers. Like there is no universality of, at least in India. So is there a reason why? Are there Navar or Martab train in Navsari different from Surat, or can you enlighten us on that? Like why the shifts in, like it sounds different sometimes the way different priests pray.
So I think from what you're saying, yes, it sounds differently, but it is not to do with the geographical area. It's not that a particular school is being trained, because the text from which these priests are trained has become uniform. It depends on what. So in Gujarati, there's a term called ladhan. Ladhan is the sort of the rhythm or the space at the style of reciting, and that would depend on the teacher and how he is instructing the students to pray. But there was a thesis done by Rayoman. I'm forgetting his last name.
Rayoman
Mirza, exactly. And he has studied this in a lot of detail, whether there is a sort of a musical this to it. And his thesis on that is quite enlightening if you'd like to find more details on it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Enrico, I don't know if there is questions in the chat. Maybe you can spend 5 minutes more.
We don't. Now there are comments about really enjoying the detailed information and process. I'm sorry I had to cut a couple of questions, but we're really like 10 past and we're supposed to close it, to end at 2. But anyway, I really thank you a lot for this very clear and really interesting presentation. And I thank everyone for being there. I don't know if Professor Tavakoli wants to add something, just as a goodbye message. Or
Dr. Daruwalla, thank you for your highly informative presentation. and it has been a treat listening to you. And I would like to also thank all of our colleagues who have attended today's session. And I wish you all happy Nowruz.
Sorry?
Yes?
I think there was just
someone speaking, but
talking to someone else probably. Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you for joining us. Wish you a happy, healthy, and inspiring Nowruz.